Okay, so this is the video for our 11th week. As I already posted the announcement on the cyber campus, the official schedule for the final exams were released by our College of Economics and Management. According to the schedule, we're gonna take the exam on I think July 17th, maybe. That's just my guess. So it could be wrong. But anyway, so um, our original plan is to take the exam on the face-to-face system. So you have to come to the university to take the exam 30 minutes before the exam starts. So that's not my rule. That's a rule set by the university. So you should arrive 30 minutes before our exam starts at the gate. So there is only one gate you can enter. The main gate will be the center gate of the building. So by arriving, you have to take the test. Test may be pretty easy, take your temperature. And if you are passed, which means that your temperature should be lower than 38 Celsius degree, maybe, then you can enter the building. Then you can take the exam on paper, but you have to bring your own facial mask and your own tissue, wet tissue, real tissue, to take it clear around your table. So I don't know how exactly the school's plan is going to be well or to be worse. My guess is that they're gonna have to, and they're gonna try to have enough distance between students if they take the exam on face, and minimize the chance to get touched each other, including me. So I will be there to supervise the exam with the other supervisors because our class is pretty big. It is about 100 students. So it will be divided by the 3 different classrooms. So I already downloaded which student ID number should be in each classroom. So you should look at my information carefully about it. So yeah, you can meet me for the first time in real at the end of the semester. So be prepared for the real exam, not online but offline exam. I don't know if it is the best option for us. I mean, it there could be another option we can take, but this is rule set by the university. So if we strongly oppose to that idea, then we can take the online exam. But at this time, I would not have the survey like we did in the midterm, and I would like to follow the rule for several reasons. The most important reason I hope to follow the university rule is, as you guys expect, the risk of cheating. If we take the both midterm and final exam online, then 90% of your grade will be determined by that online type of exams. And if there is any kinds of significant cheating by any of our classmates, then your final grade will be affected by that cheating by any means. And I don't want to see that happen in my class. So that's, I think, the first and the most important reason for the offline exam I choose. But if you have different idea, please give me your own idea. I will definitely consider about it. And the format of our final exam, I'm thinking about the multiple choice type exam, 객관식, not short answer question like you did in the midterm 주관식 for several reasons as well. The first reason for considering about the multiple choice type final exam is that I really don't wanna touch your paper. I want to minimize the chance to touch the paper you wrote on your answer sheet. So yeah, that's the one reason. And the second reason is that most of our students got messed up on your midterm, and you definitely want to increase your score before you finish this semester. I don't think you have to do that because still we have the relative evaluation system, which means that if you do better than your classmates, then you can get A, even if you get only one answer right out of the 10 questions, maybe, for instance. Your absolute score is still low, but you can still get A if you do better than your classmates. But anyway, for your maybe satisfaction or for your maybe the feeling about your course, many of you guys may need or may want to have a little bit easier difficulty level on your final exam rather than the midterm exam. So maybe multiple choice type question will be more familiar with you, because even if you don't know about the answer, you can get one random answer. So you can get probably 25% chance to get the right answer, even if you have no idea about the question. So I think you definitely want that question. That's the second reason. And the third reason is that I want to minimize the exam time because we will be in the same space, same public space, in which we have a potential virus within the classroom on theory, right? So the best thing we can do in that case is to minimize the time you stay there. So I think the multiple choice type question will take definitely shorter time than the written type of question, because if you don't study at all, then you can just choose the random answers for all 25 or 30 questions in 5 minutes that you can get out of there. So I think that's more convenient way to finish your exam, even if you don't study well, you don't study hard. So I'm just thinking about it. It's not fixed. I'm still thinking about it until the last day I make the question, and I'll let you know whenever I finish making the final exam. Okay. So my targeted exam time, the duration of the exam will be maybe 20 minutes for my best student, and maybe less than 40 minutes for my worst student. Okay. And any other things to think about the final exam? So if you have any idea, please let me know. You can email me or you can simply write on the cyber campus, or you can just call me, text me, or just knock the door of my office, whatever you want. You can do that. Then I will answer as soon as possible. Right? Yeah. So I'm still afraid of meeting the collective people in specific fixed area of the location, especially if it is the inside building. And I know many of you guys have the exact same worry with me, but we'll see what happens. I think the Seoul and the areas around the Seoul has some serious problem right now because of some restarting pandemic situation on that region. But I think the Daejeon area and the Sejong and Chungnam, we are still safer, relatively speaking. So I think the university will have the smart decision before our final exam really starts in the second week of the June, right? Okay, so if you have a question, please let me know. And we're gonna finish this chapter pretty much soon. We are studying about the cost, and the cost is the most important part of the production sector. And this chapter and the later chapter, the competitive market, we will deepen our knowledge about the production mechanism and how the price is determined by the suppliers. The supply side is a little bit more complicated rather than the consumer side, because consumer side is pretty much simple. If you want it, then you can buy it by paying for the one, right? So it is simply based on your desire. If you have desire to consume that one, then you are willing to pay for it. So you can just make the decision if it is too expensive or not expensive. That's pretty much simple decision by the consumer. But so it is a little bit more like the psychological mechanism if you see the inside of the consumer's decision making. But in the other side, the producer side is a little bit more complicated because they have to think about their cost structure first. So they cannot sell any good or services which is cheaper than their production cost, because if they do that, they're gonna lose some money. And there is no seller who really wants to lose their money by selling more goods or services. So, and the cost structure is not psychological thing. It is more like mechanical thing or more like physical things. So we are studying about the structure of the cost, and after finishing understanding our cost structure, then we can see how this cost structure will affect the production decision making in different types of markets. Okay, so we'll do a little bit of math, which means the mathematics, not the cocaine or any other drugs. In English slang, math means a drug, very strong drug. If you do a math, then your brain will be seriously damaged by doing that.
그건 잘 모르겠습니다. 제가 도울 수 있는 다른 부분이 있을까요?
없어. I think the iPhone likes drug. She rarely responds my voice, but she did that at this time, so I think she likes smoking pot or something. But anyway, if you have any chance to taste a higher level of drugs, I recommend you to avoid that chance, because your damage or that experience will damage your brain, and I think your career in future will definitely heavily use your brain. You are not going to work physically, right? So you work with your brain and on your desk inside the building. So keeping your brain fresh is pretty much important. So doing drug is not a good idea for you if you think about your career seriously. But anyway, so we are not talking about the math. We are talking about the math, right? So we make a relation between the marginal cost and the production function. So this Babbitt line is simply a production function. You may be a little bit familiar with this graph, right? So the horizontal axis shows the input, the labor in this case, because we are still living in the world of the short term or short run. And the vertical axis represent the total quantity of your output. But now we can relate this production input table with the cost, the total cost and the variable cost table. right? So first you can look at our horizontal axis. So our variable cost is in this short term will be defined by a minimum wage, the wage per unit of labor times the total amount of labor as an input, because we are not thinking about the capital in this time. So the labor is the only input in our short run. So your variable cost is affected by the change of your labor input. So your total variable cost is defined by wage per unit of labor times the total labor input. So the vertical axis, if you put more labor, then your output will be increasing. So your production function is increasing function. But your total cost function is also increasing function by the unit of labor, right? Because your variable cost is the only variable part of your total cost. The fixed cost is not changing. It is just horizontal line in your total cost curve. So if your total cost curve is increasing, it must be affected by your variable cost. And your variable cost is defined by W, your wage per unit, times the labor. So your total cost is also the increasing function of the labor. So it is also increasing function, right? So this is a little bit of complicated for some who are not familiar with the mathematics, but you can slowly follow the step by step, then you can get the full understanding about it. So firstly, we start with the definition of marginal cost. Your marginal cost is defined by, from the equation number 3 maybe. Yes, equation number 3. The marginal cost is defined by change of your variable cost, because change of fixed cost divided by the change of quantity will be 0, right? The fixed cost is just constant term, so you can take derivative of constant, then it could be the 0 as a result. So your marginal cost is defined by a change of variable cost divided by the change of your quantity of output. So we can start with that one. But in the short run, we are not thinking about the capital. So your change of variable cost is defined by your nominal wage per unit of labor, which is assumed not to be changed, times the change of your labor input, right? So equation number 7 is come from this one, the VC equals to W times L. So equation number 7 is easily understood from the previous definition of your variable cost. So you can relate equation number 7 and the definition of marginal cost, then you can get the equation number 8, right? So you can replace the change of variable cost with the W, the wage per unit, times the change of the labor unit input, right? So your marginal cost is equals to the wage times the change of labor input divided by the change of quantity, right? So now we can introduce the marginal productivity of labor. Marginal productivity of labor is defined by the additional output, the quantity, created by or affected by every additional unit of labor. So if you increase 1 unit of labor, then certain amount of quantity will be increased. That's the definition of marginal product of labor, or simply MPL. So equation number 9 is a definition of MPL. Your quantity change is affected by 1 unit, one additional unit changes of your labor input. So change of quantity divided by the change of labor is the definition of marginal product of labor, equation number 9. The remaining part is combining equation number 8 and equation number 9 all together. Then you can simply remove delta L over delta Q, right? So that's simple math. So you can do that by yourself. Don't worry about it. If you can definitely do that. If you are right-hand writer, you can do that by the left hand. So it is super easy. So you can get the final result of the marginal cost. Marginal cost is equals to your nominal wage per unit of labor divided by marginal product of labor. So this is just simply the mathematical result of calculation, but the more important is the interpretation of equation number 10. So now we can relate the cost part of the production with the production part of the selling information, right? So from your production function, you can handle the ampere, right? And your total cost function part, you can handle the marginal cost part. So equation number 10 is pretty much important because it is the result of the relation between your marginal cost part and your marginal product of labor part. So if you are a seller, then you have to always think about your ability to produce one more unit by putting one more input. Also, you have to think about your additional cost created by producing more output, right? So you can definitely compare between those two things. And if you decide there will be a chance to create more profit by increasing one more unit of output, then you can go for it. But comparing between the marginal cost and the marginal product of labor, you can decide that, okay, if I produce more output, then there will be more cost rather than the more profit or more gains from selling that good. Then you can stop there, right? So your production decision making is a little bit more complicated, but you have to think about only two things: marginal cost and your marginal revenue from producing one more unit of output. And your right hand side of equation number 10, W over ampere, is the structure of your marginal cost, right? W is the nominal wage. And we assume that it is not changing in our short run. So it is just given number to us. But you can observe the evolution of marginal product of labor, right? So if you buy one more labor unit, one more labor input, then you can observe the change of your quantity, which is defined of the MPL or marginal product of labor. So you can enjoy the evolution of MPL, but it is directly related to your marginal cost curve. And your marginal cost curve will determine which level is the optimal level of output. Optimal level of output means the point where you can maximize your profit. Okay, so we'll think about it in the later part of this chapter. Average variable cost is also related to your average product of labor with the similar fashion. So average variable cost is defined by variable cost divided by the quantity of output, right? So that's the definition. And in the short run, there is no capital variable cost or no capital which is variable in our production process. Average variable cost is defined by variable cost divided by the quantity of output, and also your only variable cost is W times L in short run. In long run, the story is totally different, but in short run, we only think about the labor part. So your variable cost is W times L. So equation number 11 is simply understood. And APL, or average product of labor, is defined by the total quantity of output divided by your labor input, the total labor input. So it is simpler version of maybe MPL or something, but be careful, MPL and APL are totally different concepts. So you can not be confused with the terms of APL and MPL. But anyway, so with the definition of APL, you can simply substitute this definition into equation number 11. Then you can get the relation between the AVC and APL, like equation number 12. So equation number 12 and equation number 10 are two important equations which relate your cost structure with your production structure. And there is one given very important variable, which is the nominal wage, W, because we can expand this knowledge into the long run situation, and long run situation we can get another price, the rental rate of capital, or simply the R. So W and R are two prices in the production process. So the ratio between the W and R is pretty much important in determining the optimal level of output. So this is the special case or special example of one beer manufacturer. So in this graph, your marginal cost curve is not decreasing in any point. So your marginal cost is always increasing, and your average variable cost is always increasing as well. And your average fixed cost is decreasing always. So this is a type of the special example. But even with this special example, the property that your marginal cost will intersect the minimum point of your average cost is not changing, right? And also, since the marginal cost and the average variable cost are both always increasing graph, there is no intersection point between the marginal cost and the average variable cost, because we know that marginal cost curve will also intersect average variable cost with its the minimum point, but average variable cost is now always increasing, so marginal cost should be always higher than average variable cost in this case. Okay, I think this part is pretty boring to me. No. So, okay. But anyway, we can just keep going because we have tons of pages left, and I really want to finish this chapter today. This is my hope. So I will keep continue to talk whatever I want. We can also think about the tax. Tax to a producer is another cost. Think about your chicken restaurant. Your dad and your mom are working hard for their own business, but let us assume that the government just decides increasing tax for every chicken restaurant by 100%. So the taxes your parents should pay for the government is just doubled up suddenly. Then it could be understood as the increasing the production cost for every single producer. For example, like this page, suppose that the government collects a specific tax of the $10 per unit of output from the farm. So if there is collected $10 per every each single unit of output, then the production cost at every single each point of output is increased exactly by the $10. So your marginal cost is increasing by $10, and your average variable cost is also increasing by $10, but the fixed cost is not changing. Like this. So ACB is, I think, the before taxes curve, and ACA is after taxes average cost curve, and MCB is the marginal cost before taxes, and MCA maybe, my guess, the after tax marginal cost curve. So simply at the same amount of quantity, 8 units, the original average cost and the marginal cost was the $27, but after that level of specific tax, the marginal cost and the average cost are increased exactly by $10. So at the same unit of quantity of output, the A unit in this graph is increased from $27 to $37. So every single producer has to pay for more production cost at the same quantity of output with the same quality of the output. So it is pretty bad for a producer. So that's the reason why every producer try their best to avoid tax. But one lesson you should remember is that the tax collector, the government, will ultimately find you whatever you want and whatever you do. So don't try to avoid tax when you start your own business or when you start your own work, because your taxes will be collected anyway. Anyway, it will be collected. So paying at appropriate time with the appropriate amount of tax is the best idea to maintain your life without any risk. So how about the lump sum tax situation? If there is a lump sum tax on the quantity at which a firm's after-tax average cost curve reaches its minimum, right? So let us assume that the firm's before-tax average cost curve is the U-shape. So simply saying before average cost curve is the U-shape and after average cost curve may be the U-shape as well. But in this lump sum tax situation, the marginal cost is not changing, but only average cost is changing exactly by the total lump sum tax divided by the quantity at before quantity of the quantity before tax quantity of output. So marginal cost is still intersect the minimum point of average cost even after the tax collected. So now we can turn into the long run cost curve. The difference between the long run and the short run is that there is no fixed cost in the long run, because all fixed costs are avoidable in the long run. So your fixed cost should be always equals to zero. So in microeconomic world, your time span in the long run is long enough that all the fixed cost is negligible, or it could be avoidable, which means that in the long run, you can change all the machines of your chicken restaurant, because you should upgrade the machines for cooking chicken in your restaurant after 10 years, maybe after 15 years, because the consumers' taste must be changed, and also the machines will be depreciated. It is pretty old and rust, so you need to buy the new machine. Then your fixed cost is not fixed cost anymore. It could be one of the variable costs in the long run, right? So all the fixed cost should be translated or transferred to the part of your variable cost. So as a result, the long run total cost exactly equals to the total variable cost, because there is no fixed cost. So now we can introduce the new concept. Okay, so I think this is our last new concept in this chapter, which name is the ISO cost line. So ISO means the same, and the cost means the total expenditure that a single producer had to pay for to produce the certain amount of output. So the ISO cost line is simply defined by any combinations of the two inputs in this case, because we are now living in the long run world. So we have to think about the labor input and the capital input. So there could be the numerous combinations between the labor and the capital. And with a certain level of combination, your total cost will not be changed, even if you change the combination between the labor and the capital. Sometimes you increase the labor, but decreasing capital, or sometimes you increase the capital but decreasing the amount of labor, but you have the same level of expenditure. So all the combinations which will give you the same expenditure of production, and if you have any kinds of line of that combination of the inputs, then it could be the ICE cost line. So let us start to define a single firm's total cost, which must be a linear, because your total cost will be simply the summation of the total cost from your capital side and the total cost of your labor side. So there is a typo in equation number 13. I will fix it. So this is not K, and this is not K, and this is L, and this is L. Okay? So your total cost is defined by the nominal wage per unit of labor input times the total labor input you have plus the nominal rate of return on your unit of capital times the total capital unit as an input. So equation number 13 is the total cost curve definition. So total cost consists of two parts. The first term on the right hand side is the labor cost, and the second term on the right hand side is the capital cost. Okay, so the total cost is summation of the labor cost and the capital cost in this case. So now we can start from, so there is still a typo. There is okay. So we start with equation number 14. By the definition, we can fix the specific level of total cost with the bar there. So C bar means that we don't know about the number of C bar. This is not the slang, just C bar, not the one you may think. Any random specific fixed number of the total cost, and you can have the potential numerous number of combinations between the number of L and K, and we assume that the W and R are fixed or they are given from the market. You cannot control for W and R, but you can control for L and K. So usually we put the amount of labor on the horizontal axis and the amount of capital on the vertical axis, so we can rewrite equation number 15 with the function of K, because we are familiar with the y-axis variable with the dependent variable and the variable on the horizontal axis or x-axis as the independent variable. We are very familiar with that type of the two-dimensional words, so we can rewrite equation number 15. Then the result is equation number 16. So the amount of K input or the capital input is consists of the two parts. The first term on the right hand side in equation number 16 is our intercept, right? Intercept is the C bar divided by the R, the rate of return on the capital, and there is negative sign on in the front of the L. So we can guess that this graph, the equation number 16, is a decreasing graph. And since there is no square or any square root sign on either side of the K and L, we can guess that this graph, the equation number 16, is the straight line, the linear decreasing graph, right? We can guess that. And the slope of this graph should be negative W over R. And negative W over R is not changing over time because we cannot control for it. In this case, we assume that. And the economic interpretation of this slope, negative W over R, is pretty much important. Think about it. What's the economic meaning of negative W over R? You are given that number if you participate in the market of the production, and the W is the unit cost for your additional unit of labor, right? And R is a unit cost for your additional unit of capital. So the W over R is the relative cost or relative price of your labor input compared to the capital. So since this, if there is increasing in this number, which means that it is costly to use 1 unit of labor instead of capital. If this number is going low, then the price for using 1 more unit of labor is getting cheaper. So you can hire more labor with the lower number of this slope. With the higher number of this slope, it is more costly to hire 1 unit of your labor. So you tend to heavily use your capital rather than your labor. Okay. Okay, so this is the example table. Your total expenditure is fixed at the $200 in this case. The far right column, the sixth column of this table represent total cost, your labor cost plus your capital cost is fixed as the $200 at any bundle from A to E. But the combination between your labor and capital are different. For instance, at the bundle A, you use the labor by 20 units, but you never use any amount of capital. So your total cost is exactly equals to your labor cost. But at the bundle of E, you use the 0 labor, but you use the 10 capital. So the total cost is the $200 the same, but this $200 is exactly the same with your capital cost, the $200. So lining up all the bundles from A, B to E will be your one iso cost line with the total expenditure at the $200, like this. So this blue line is $200 iso cost curve, and it is straight line, and it is a decreasing line. And we know the slope. Slope is 1 over 2, right? 1 over 2 means that 1 unit of labor, price for 1 unit of labor is if you want to buy 1 unit of labor, then you have to give up the half unit of capital because the price per capital is twice expensive than your price for using 1 additional unit of labor. So the slope is the 1 over 2, the negative 1 over 2. It is the market price for your input, market price for your production factors on other markets, right? From your Principles of Economics textbook, you studied there are 2 representative markets in our economy. The first one is that the goods or the services market. The price in the market is the price per good or price per your service. And there is another types of market, which is the factor production market or the input market. And the price in the market is maybe wage for your labor and maybe rate of return on the capital if you use the capital. And this price level is the relative price in the factor production market. Okay, so the slope has huge economic meaning, and now we are pretty much clear about the shape of this iso cost line. if the C bar is increased from $200 to the $300, then you can mathematically conclude that there is no change in the slope, but there is only change in your intercept because the R is the same and the W is the same in the graph, the equation number 16, right? This one, right? But only change in this example is the increasing in the C bar. So your intercept is increasing. So this coastline will be outward move there with the same slope. So one smart student may think about the important property of this coastline. What's that? It is very similar to your production possibility frontier, right? With the available cost increasing, then there is outward moving or outward shift of this ice coastline, which means that there is more chance or more varieties of combinations between the L and K to produce within that expenditure. So there is more chance to have the more variety of the combinations between the labor and the capital. If the C bar is decreased from $200 to $100, then your maybe availability or your maybe ability to produce or to make the combination between the L and K will be also shrunk. So it will be inward shift from AE line to the inside of that one. So there will be the slim chance to increase your production capacity with a smaller number of expenditure, ice cost expenditure here. So this is the totally new part, a little bit a new part. So we can stop here, then we can continue in the next video to conclude this chapter. We really conclude this chapter in the next video, I hope.